And is it any wonder why a lot of Democrats are trying to downplay it? Well, welcome, everybody. I'm Neil CAVUTO. And did any of you see or hear this? Take a look.
I'm not sure that $1,000, which is taxable, goes very far for almost anyone.
Corporations, they got a huge tax break, are doing these one-time bonuses. That is not the lift that was promised. It's not even close.
Some of them are not getting anything. Some of them getting raises, and the rest are getting crumbs.
The crumbs that they are giving to workers to kind of put the schmooze on is so pathetic.
All right, so leave your politics out of this for a second. Pathetic? Does this look pathetic to you? Item one, Fiat Chrysler, 60,000 workers, $2,000. AT&T, 200,000 workers, $1,000. Bank of America, 145,000 workers, $1,000. I could go on because the list goes on, and it expands on and on. So we're going wall to wall with former Obama economic advisor Austin Goolsbee on Democrats dismissing this, White House Budget Director Mick Mulvaney on even whether the White House is surprised by this, Home Depot co-founder Bernie Marcus on his company just becoming a part of this, Democratic Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper on certain blue states now trying to legally stop this. First, to Fox Business Network's Lawrence Simonetti on the bonus bonanza, and also Ellison Barber on a president sizzling on a good PR bonanza. We begin with Lauren.
So many companies, Neil. First, it was the ones that you mentioned, AT&T, Bank of America, and others, doling out the tax cut savings to their workers. But then, not only did that list get bigger, but so did the companies. It surprised even the administration, as the Office of Management and Budget told you, Neil.
We didn't even expect the Christmas bonuses that went out. We didn't expect the minimum wage increases from large employers across the country. That was even more than we expected. We think that we've under-promised on the tax reform and the impacts that we can have in the economy.
Well, just this week, Home Depot giving thousands of its hourly workers up to $1,000 bonuses. And we're going to talk to Bernie Marcus, the co-founder of the company, in just a few minutes. But let's get back to that growing list now. FedEx spending $3.2 billion on wage hikes, bonuses, as well as pension funding. Starbucks investing $250 million in itself, offering 150,000 workers more money, better benefits, plus they're creating thousands of new jobs. Let's flip it to JPMorgan Chase, a $20 billion investment over 5 years, giving 22,000 workers wages that start at $15 an hour. Chase is also opening 400 new branches, creating 4,000 new jobs. Disney is spending $125 million, so 125,000 employees can receive $1,000 bonuses. And Walmart, well, their package was actually announced last week, but it was big. We're talking more than 1 million hourly workers, 1 million, getting base wages that start at $11 an hour. They'll see that go into effect next month, plus bonuses up to $1,000 and increased family benefits totaling $700 million. So we asked folks around here how this new corporate generosity makes them feel.
I think it's good for the people on the ground that are doing all the work.
You know, there's more money in the paycheck today, so that could be positive. Hopefully that fixes the economy stuff.
I think it's a nice gesture, but when you look at it as a percentage of the windfall they're receiving from the tax benefit, it's minuscule.
I work for Southwest Airlines, and I got a check for $1,000. So thank you, President Trump.
Americans for Tax Reform keeping a good tally of all of this. They say 265 companies are sharing their tax reform savings with millions and millions of workers. Very likely just the beginning. These crumbs, Neil.
These crumbs. But again, you know, you can always test the motivation of these companies doing this and all. Are there folks getting this money or not? They appear to be. So we'll see how that all sorts out. Meanwhile, the president is probably going to be mentioning this in his State of the Union address in a couple of days. How is he preparing for all of that? Ellison Barber has the very latest. Ellison, what are you hearing?
Hi, Neil. President Trump seemed upbeat leaving Davos. He tweeted that his speech was, quote, well received. Now he has another speech to prepare for, his very first State of the Union address. He's addressed Congress before, but this is President Trump's first official State of the Union address. And the congressional update mandated by the Constitution is set to take place Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. There are many legislative priorities the president could lay out, from infrastructure to immigration. He also may bring up things that have already passed, like tax reform. Until he speaks, it's a bit of a guessing game, but most political analysts expect the economy to be a major focus. Many voters think the economy is in a good place. The latest Fox poll found that 17% of voters believe the economy is in excellent shape. 32% say good, 35% only fair, and 14% say the economy is in poor shape. 40% of voters polled say the Trump administration has made the economy better. More people believe he's made it better than worse, but about 50% of voters polled don't give President Trump credit for the economy. 22% say the administration has made the economy worse. About a third of those polled say the administration has not made a difference one way or another. After President Trump's speech, Representative Joe Kennedy of Massachusetts will deliver the Democrats' official response. Neil?
All right, thank you very much, Allison. Not all Democrats, by the way, are going to be at that State of the Union address. We'll talk to one who's saying that they're acting like children and should grow up. That's coming up later on. In the meantime, you know, there was a time when global leaders would snicker when the President of the United States was speaking. It was only a few months ago. They have moved from snickering to sucking up. And it was very, very apparent in Davos this week. Let's get to read on all of that with John Layfield. We got Dagan McDowell back with us, Daniel McLaughlin, political analyst. Dagan, it was remarkable to see a world body that is poo-pooed. I don't know what French is for poo-pooed or Swiss.
I think it's poo-poo.
Poo-pooed. This is the same gang that was chasing those Nutella jars, by the way. But what do you make of that? I mean, all of a sudden they're trying to do deals with the president, get in photos with the president, squeeze in some time with the president. What happened?
America's open for business now with this massive tax reform. And it's not just for individuals, obviously. It's for the corporations, permanent tax cuts for corporations that also do business with all these other nations. Last year, you had every major developed country growing simultaneously. There were 45 countries that were growing. So they understand that these policies that the president has shepherded, has put in place, are good for business around the globe. So there is a lot of, as we say down south, there's a lot of butt smooching going on.
Yeah, you know, Danielle, there was a time when Democrats, and hopefully we have the audio of this and we can get it, Pam, if we don't, where $1,000 was a lot of money and it meant something to them. But I guess when it's companies handing out bonus checks, it doesn't. Will they regret their no votes?
I think they will, actually. $1,000 is a lot of money to most of Americans who are earning $40,000 or $50,000 by the median or the average, depending on how you're looking at it. Yeah, Democrats have cared about this for a very long time. They've always said they're the party of the working class and the middle class. And I think particularly with all of the bonuses and the benefits that we're seeing from Starbucks to Apple, you name it, they're going to rue the day they said it was crumbs, because I don't think the Trump administration expected that this was going to happen, and they certainly don't think the Democrats did either.
I've nicknamed Nancy Pelosi Marie Antoinette. Because crumbs buy a lot more than just a slice of cake in this country. You know, I mean, $1,000 buys more than a piece of cake. $1,000 can feed a family of 4 for about a month. Fill up your gas tank about 20, 25 times. So there you go. Nancy Antoinette.
Very, very well put. But, you know, it wasn't that long ago when Democrats were pushing under President Obama payroll tax relief that would amount to $1,000. So it was important then, and it was important then, and it's consequential now. They're arguing, John Layfield, that these companies can afford to give more because they got so much out of the tax cut. That may or may not be the case. The fact is they are doing it. Right.
They are doing it, and it's crazy that it's not enough that they're doing it. They have to do it for the right reasons. You know, and now you're assigning motive to these companies, and then when you say, well, they're doing the right thing. I don't think the company's motive matters to a Home Depot worker or an AT&T worker. I don't think it matters at all. Who cares if they're doing it for publicity? Who cares if they're doing it for political reasons? Who cares if they're doing it for the right thing? These workers that need this money are getting the money, and they have 70% of GDP is consumer spending right now. This is going to help the economy. This is going to certainly help these workers. And fighting over who gets credit just shows how divided this country is politically.
You could also say, Dagan, that this is all happening pre-individuals seeing it in their regular checks. I guess that will start in droves next month. So this is pre-that. And I always think that companies feel they've got to keep up with the Joneses, the other companies, to follow up and do their own thing. Do you think they will? In other words, we've got to think about 1 out of 10 of the S&P 500 companies doing this. I'm told it is very likely when all is said and done, they all will. Then what?
You're going to have potentially, and this is from Jamie Dimon, the head of J.P. Morgan Chase.
Big Democrat.
Big old Democrat. 4% growth potentially in the coming year. We haven't seen 4% growth in the United States since the year 2000. In any one year. We haven't seen 3% growth in the United States since 2005, and this goes to why we had such a stagnation during the Obama years. It was the lack of capital spending. It was the lack of business investment. And in the last quarter, we got the GDP out yesterday morning. Business non-residential investment was up 6.8%. That is a dramatic number. That is a big increase, and that is what is making the difference here is we have a much more friendly playing field for businesses far and wide. Big businesses and small businesses who were crushed by regulations, particularly those in Obamacare.
Well, a lot of this was spurred by the regulatory effort first, before the tax cuts even came to fruition. Danielle, it's always risky and early in this case to start handicapping the midterm elections in November. But you could see if this sticks and resonates and people appreciate it and like it, that their sentiment could change. Poll numbers are picking up in approval for the tax cut itself, sentiment towards the economy, not necessarily for the president himself. But what do you think?
Well, the generic ballot still favors Democrats pretty heavily, which we would expect, because although the economic news is very good and these tax cuts are great, there's still a lot of things that are happening out of the White House that are problematic. We still are on this roller coaster of scandal, which in and of itself is unstable. So instability is also a problem from an economic perspective. It's the economy, stupid, right? So we go back to the Clinton years, and Bill Clinton understood that that was the way that people vote with their wallets in a lot of respects. I think from the CEO perspective, they're really happy about the tax break. They want to bring their money back in, and they want to invest in people and plant. They are still going to stand up to the president, though, when it relates to immigration, I think, when there are social issues that they're concerned about, because at the end of the day, they are leaders and they care about their people, and they also care about what their people think.
All right, we shall see. I want to thank you all. In the meantime, of course, the market certainly enjoyed this over the course of the week. We are running at a torrid pace with the Dow up about 8% year to date. We've had 99 records since Donald Trump was first elected president. And a lot of people say, and Dagan touched on some of the particulars.
It means absolutely eliminating political bias or favoritism in either direction from our investigations and our prosecutions. That sort of thinking is the antithesis of what the department stands for. We will not tolerate it.
All right, Jeff Sessions is going after those in the FBI, two individuals in particular, sort of dismissing Donald Trump before he was elected, and then trying to do everything they could to maybe ratchet up an investigation into Russian ties in the past election to make sure he'd be a weakened leader. Now, there are texts to prove that, back and forth to at least indicate that. But to hear a lot of Democrats tell it, it is unfair, it is just not right, and it is questioning the veracity of our highest security institutions at the same time. Nevertheless, there were many, of course, who supported this approach when it came to finding out what the Pentagon thought in the so-called Pentagon Papers and inflating casualty counts during the Vietnam War, and then coming back to question whether all agencies were on the same page prior to 9/11, why they weren't communicating. It was okay then. Why isn't it okay now? Fox News contributor and the Federalist, Molly Hemingway. Molly, this is the back and forth on this, that Democrats are saying it is unfair and it is not right and it is an insult to our institutions, namely FBI, to question whether they're all doing things on the same page and for the same righteous reasons. What do you think?
Right. Well, I think it suggests that there is something very significant that we're learning about these long congressional investigations, which have uncovered that there was politicization in the handling of both the Hillary Clinton email investigation and the Donald Trump Russia investigation. That is very important. That is serious. And it's the job of Congress to perform oversight. That's its constitutional responsibility. So while I understand that it's very dangerous to the overarching narrative that we've been subjected to for more than a year, the one that claims that Trump colluded with Russia to treasonously steal the election, it is more important that we have an FBI and Department of Justice that people can trust, that we don't have agencies where we think there's one set of rules for political friends and one set of rules for political enemies. The integrity of these agencies does require some uncomfortable airing of dirty laundry, but it's for the good of the country that we do this rather than try to sweep it under the rug or move it aside. It's that key.
Yeah, I just noticed both sides can play politics with this, but it was particularly glaring when I heard Chuck Schumer railing about this, especially remembering what he had said when he was blasting then FBI Director Comey for his back and forth in the Hillary Clinton investigation. I want you to see these positions back to back. Chuck Schumer then.
I was appalled by what Director Comey did. He owes not only Secretary Clinton, but the American people an explanation for what appears to be an appalling action.
The Republican Party, which used to hold itself up as a law and order party, seems intent on destroying the credibility of our premier law and order agency and the hardworking men and women who serve there.
What do you think of that, Molly?
Well, it's interesting. We know about what we do know about the politicization at the FBI precisely because Democrats were upset with Comey's handling of Hillary Clinton in the days before the election. And I think they were right to be upset, actually. But because of that investigation into what they perceived as politicization, we got all these texts which show that maybe James Comey wasn't telling the truth when he was under oath, claiming that the Department of Justice didn't know what he was going to do about the Hillary Clinton probe, or that he didn't make his decision until after he interviewed Hillary Clinton. So because of that investigation, we have learned about problems, even that Strzok and Page talked about how they didn't hand over to Congress a full accounting of Hillary Clinton's statements to the FBI because it included some inflammatory statements. I mean, all sorts of things we're learning because of these two chatty lovers couldn't stop talking about what they were doing at work.
Let's assume they're the exception to the rule. I'm sure there are. But if you played out this rage at so-called politicization of this on the part of Democrats saying this of Republicans, would they not have held the Pentagon accountable for inflated casualty estimates during the Vietnam War that would not have come to light unless those Pentagon papers were released? We didn't question the veracity or the decency of most people then who worked at the Pentagon any more than we are most who work at the FBI today.
Yeah, it's a straw man to say that if you recognize problematic behavior among a few individuals that you're therefore casting aspersions on everyone. In fact, it hurts the reputation of all FBI agents if there are some bad apples. And that's why it's even more important for their sake that we get to the bottom of this and just clear the air. If there's nothing wrong there, that's good. If we find out problems, we need to fix them.
I'm telling you, if the roles were reversed, it would be front page material every day.
Yes.
Molly, thank you very, very much. In the meantime, we're hearing a lot of Democrats dismissing these $1,000 bonuses right now as crumbs, even though they're coming from companies. There was a time when President Barack Obama was in power when $1,000 meant a lot more. What happened? We play the tape. You decide. All right, we've got former Obama economic advisor Austin Goolsbee with us, widely respected on both sides. He's a fairly straight shooter. You know where he's coming from, of course, but he always answers questions I've given him very honestly and straightforwardly, so I'm very happy to have him. Austin, thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. You better watch what you say. You're going to get some of your viewers are not going to like you saying nice things about me.
Well, I won't push it. I don't love you. I'm just saying that you're a decent human being. All right, Austin, all kidding aside, I mean, what do you make of the criticism that a lot of Democrats are charged about the tax cuts and these bonuses coming from companies because they're sort of poo-pooing, many of them, the $1,000? And I'm thinking back to the time around 2011, the president and many other Democrats were pushing for payroll tax relief that amounted to, I think, about $40 a week at the time, including President Obama. I want you to look at this.
Game for the average family who doesn't have an extra $1,000 to lose. It's not a game for somebody who's out there looking for work right now.
Now, to add to that, at the time, Austin, as you recall, Nancy Pelosi said, today's agreement is a victory for the American people. They spoke out clearly, and $40 in each paycheck will make a difference. So what's the difference now?
Well, look, $1,000 is a lot of money. And back then, I was proud of, and part of that making work pay tax credit was $2,000. You're right. It was $40 a week. I think it's a mistake. It's at best, it's inartfully stated if people are saying $1,000 is crumbs. I think the idea that companies, we're going to borrow something like $3 trillion to pay for gigantic tax cuts, which the companies pass on less than 3% of that money to their workers. I think that's a fair thing to criticize, but I think it's not really planetary to be describing $1,000 as not a lot of money.
Fair enough. Now, and it is fair enough as well to say that companies maybe could share the wealth more. Some are, some aren't. In case of Chrysler Fiat, $5,500 a worker if things work out in the bottom line a year from now. So that some of them have attached some provisos to this. But nevertheless, are you surprised, as many of the White House were surprised? I was talking to Mick Mulvaney, the budget director, who said even he didn't envision, many of his colleagues at the White House didn't envision all these companies doing this. Now, it doesn't startle me in this respect that they got such a good deal, to your point, on this tax cut. They have to go beyond just rewarding shareholders or buying back stock. But do you think this is bigger than we can appreciate, that other companies will do this? I think 10 a day, various sizes are imitating it, so that it's very likely in the next couple of months.
Well, look, I hope
all
that
S&P
it
500 companies will. So it will have an effect on the economy. The IMF says globally it could boost growth by 0.2%.
You're kind of jumping to conclusions. I hope that this is a continuing process of us raising wages. You've seen wages finally start to go up in the last 3 years. And let's hope that this ushers in an era of even faster wage growth. Now, remember, when they sold the tax plan, they said that literally the majority of the money would not be kept by the companies and just paid out in dividends or share repurchases, that they would use it to raise wages. So this is what we want. This is what they promised to happen.
And it's
That's not
right?
happening.
Do you think we're
so
seeing
far.
as many
it's
companies?
Not happening.
But wait a minute.
It's
Look
literally
at Walmart.
3%.
Look at Walmart. You always quote Walmart. Look at how evil they are. Now, all of a sudden, Walmart is raising minimum. Walmart is raising minimum wages, and you just mentioned that I jumped the gun talking about growth. Now, the IMF itself, an institution whose numbers I think you trusted when you were in power, they are forecasting, because of this tax cut, a 0.2% improvement in global growth. Just our tax cuts alone. What do you make of that?
Well, I hope that's true. If you look at the United States growth rate in 2017, we just got the number yesterday, it was 2.3%. That's 1/10 of a point better than it was in the recovery of the previous 6 years. But the continuing growth rate of modest improvement is one thing. We should encourage it. If the companies, if you take the case of Apple, they're going to clear something like $225 billion because they're going to be able to repatriate their profits. And they gave 0.1% of that as a one-time bonus to their employees in the U.S.
But they are also investing $350
totally different
They're
order of
also
magnitude.
investing $350
wages
billion.
Should go up a lot more.
Austin,
for this
you're quite
to be
right to say,
worthwhile.
could they give more? But it sounds like you're complaining that they didn't give more.
They
but
promised
Austin,
to give more.
They're investing $350 billion in this country over the next 10 years. Scores of other companies doing the same. Now, can they do more? Should they do more? Might they do more? Like you say, I have no idea. But I am saying
that,
to
see that
none of this, Austin, none of this would have happened if there wasn't a tax forgiveness or a 15.6% rate on money held abroad to come home and get to work. A lot of these big companies are taking that money home and putting it to work.
Neil. Look, I hope that that's true, but we're borrowing
you don't think
the
Apple
money
is going
to
to
pay
do
for
this?
this
You don't
tax
think
cut,
Apple's
Neil.
going to do this? They're lying?
No, it's that we're borrowing the money to give to them to do this. So it's not just
It's
to
their
look.
money.
If I get to borrow $2 trillion and hand it out to people,
it's their money, Austin. I'm talking about the money that they held abroad. Now they've been incentivized to bring it home and put it to work.
Do you think the tax rate should be 0%? You say it's their money. Should there be no taxes?
Well, wait a minute. I'm talking about the money held abroad. Focus just on that. That one-time event where they bring that money back home. In one big company's case, they're investing it. A prominent Democrat who runs the brokerage firm.
You say they're investing it.
Listen, hear me out. I'll let you answer.
They have not decided
Austin,
how much to pay out
I will let you answer. J.P. Morgan Chase is going to invest $20 billion over the next 10 years, precisely incentivized by a tax cut. Now, keep in mind that Diamond is no fan personally of the president. In fact, he's a prominent Democrat. Lloyd Blankfein of Goldman Sachs calls this the Trump economy boom. What do these people see that you apparently don't?
No, look, as you know, Neil, when I was in the Obama administration, I was part of the group advocating we should find a way to cut the corporate tax rate.
Indeed,
I don't object to that. I encouraged and called for that. What I'm saying is, if you're not going to pay for the tax cut, if you're just going to borrow the $3 trillion that it will take to pay for it, then it is perfectly appropriate
But you guys never
to
paid
ask,
for all the
are we
spending
getting
you
our
did,
money's
Austin.
worth?
You guys never paid for all the spending you did. We had a $10 trillion to our debt.
That's not correct.
You weren't worried about that then. You were worried
That's
about
not
Americans
correct.
getting tax relief now?
You are simply factually stating things that
Did
are
the
not
debt
correct.
go up $10 trillion under your watch, or did it not?
The debt went up at the beginning of the administration, as you know, because we had the deepest recession of our lifetimes. They then cut the deficit more than in half by the end of his first term.
Did the debt go up or did it not? Were you worried about the spending that contributed to that debt? You're
Yes.
more worried about tax cut relief
Yes.
going to Americans and companies than you are about the spending that complicated it
Not
for
correct.
those individuals.
Neil, you're being disingenuous. That is not true.
Did the debt go up?
At the time,
Did the debt
when I
go
was
up?
in the
Yes, it
administration,
did.
I told you perfectly well we were concerned about how to get the deficit down once we got out of
All right,
recession.
bud.
Which we
I don't
did.
know. I'll have to respectfully disagree. We have two different memories of this. But thank you, Austin, very much. Good having you. More
Always
on the
fun to
fallout
see
from
you.
all of this argument right after this. All right, we're getting a lot of mail, good and bad, texts and like on that exchange I just had with Austin Goolsbee, the former top Obama economic official. The gist of it is this. I find it a little hypocritical for Democrats of that administration, or Democrats in general, bemoaning adding to the debt or paying for something. They seem to pick and choose their battle when it comes to tax cuts versus spending. But leaving that aside, also dismissing whether $1,000 is meaningful or not. Even in Austin Goolsbee's case, they thought that was a bit of a stretch and did look bad for Republicans to have to counter that kind of argument from Democrats. Now, we'll be speaking a little bit to Bernie Marcus. He's the co-founder of Home Depot, one of the many, many companies sharing the loot with at least $1,000 bonuses to workers, potentially more to come if the numbers work out right. Bernie joins us right now. Bernie, essentially this back and forth, the Democrats saying, you know, $1,000 is chump change. It doesn't really move the needle much. You say what?
I say that interview you just had is the most incredible thing I've ever heard. I really actually laughed out loud. You want to talk about somebody who is off the charts and doesn't understand reality. That's your last guest. It's Schumer and Pelosi. $1,000 is so meaningful. And I'll give you an example, Neil. I spent my life on the floor of the stores at Home Depot. That's what I did. Almost every week of my life, I was in stores all over the United States. And I talked to customers and I talked to employees. And I can tell you that $1,000 is more than meaningful. It could be paying the mortgage. It could be paying for a car repair. It could be paying for a past due bill. These are things that the Pelosi-Schumer group don't have a clue about. That's why they lost the election. It's as simple as that. They are so busy with their elitists in San Francisco and Hollywood and New York City and all these money deals that they go into week after week after week. And Clinton never knew about the real people out there. And that's why they lost the election. And that's why they're going to lose the next election for the same reason. When they start talking about crumbs to people in America where these are not crumbs, it's lifeline. And more important than that, there's something happening, Neil, that's critically important that makes more sense than everything else. We had a thing, you know, I'm involved with Job Creators Network, yes, which is really benefiting the small business guy. We had a conference call this week, and we talked to small business guys. Here's what they told us. Number one, what are they doing with the money? And by the way, this is a tsunami. You hear about Home Depot, you hear about Microsoft, you hear about Google, but you're not hearing about the people that really count out there, and that's the 30 million businesses, small businesses in America.
You're right about that.
Now, this money flows to them. Let me tell you what they are saying. I have a pizza guy in Florida that I'm aware of. He's going to redo his pizza parlor completely. He hasn't been able to do for 3 years. He's changing the whole thing over. He figures he's going to be able to hire 2 more people. He can expense the cost of redoing his property. That's important. That's 2 people. I spoke to a guy who is on the phone who manufactures cookies. Well, he's going to hire 3 or 4 people. Now, when you start adding that up to millions of businesses, and by the way, they're all paying higher wages. And why are they paying higher wages? Because suddenly in America, jobs are being created all over. There's becoming a shortage of workers out there. So qualified workers are getting more. This is doing more. You know, this whole $15 and they went on the streets and they went against McDonald's. Well, you know what? It's happening through the free enterprise.
No, you're right about that. You know, Bernie, I think
market.
what's lost in the sauce of this argument, I understand, you know, Democrats have said they're maybe some of them embarrassed by their no vote, worried that it could come back to boomerang on them, given this unexpected pay it forward thing that companies are doing and trying to imitate. And maybe the companies can afford to give more. And maybe they got such largesse that they should share more. But that's not the point. They also have the option of not doing this. So I think you get caught in oh, yeah, they should give more, and oh, yeah, they should. Bottom line here, I don't think people appreciate the magnitude of companies, small and large, doing this and the effect it could have on the economy. I have no idea it's going to affect Republicans and whether they can still hang on to the House and or Senate. No idea whether it's going to lift the president's approval numbers. I do know this, that consumer sentiment, retail sentiment, even in the slow fourth quarter, picked up to a degree and a pace at which we've not seen in 10 years. So there's something going on here, and I suspect the tax cuts and at the time coming and hoping that they would come to fruition are a big reason.
Well, Neil, you have to understand something. Number one, I don't think that most of corporate America or America believed that this tax was going to happen. I know that Job Creators Network was very effective in making it happen, along with some key senators that supported, like Ron Johnson. So suddenly you don't think that overnight you go from 36% in taxes to 21 and you just take it and throw it out. That's not really the way business works. People are sitting down now and figuring out their future. They're saying, look, we now have this amount of money that we didn't have before. Where could we intelligently remember, this is not the U.S. government. When they make an investment, they do it because there's got to be a return on invested capital. The U.S. government spends it because they have it. So they're going to do smart things. They're going to make smart moves, and that'll take a period of time, just like the small businesses. It's not going to turn overnight. Corporations are not going to open 14 buildings overnight. Come on, give me a break. You got to use your brains. I mean, Democrats, use your stupid brains. You don't have any brains, and understand what happens.
Now, Bernie, be nice.
Listen,
be a nice billionaire.
Listen, you're calm. Listen, you're calmer than I am. I've been watching this scene take place for a while, and I just don't get it. I just don't get their thinking. You know, what's good for America, Neil? What's good for the American people? Let's stop thinking about politics. Is this good for the Democratic Party? Does this mean we could take the presidency? I mean, let's start thinking in terms of really lifting up the lives of the American people, creating more jobs, taking more people off of food stamps. I mean, that's what it's all about. And I think that Trump is actually doing what he said he's going to do. And that is so unique and unusual for a politician to get up there and do what he said he's going to do. It's shocking. It's shocking.
Well, apparently it is for a lot of folks. Bernie, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you very, very much. A man who generated a lot of jobs for a lot of people, created Home Depot, and as I like to joke with him, he isn't even remotely handy, but it had nothing to do with his success. His guts did. Bernie Marcus, the Home Depot co-founder. Well, you know, he was mentioning that was President Trump. You know, there are a lot of people, despite what's going on the tax cut front and the pickup in the economy and all that, who are opting not to attend his State of the Union address. Could that be a mistake? Now, there are a lot of Republicans who say that. I want you to meet the Democratic Congressman Emanuel Cleaver, who says it's a big mistake as well. All right, the president, after a big success in Davos, now the question is, can he have the same type of reaction when he comes to the United States Congress? We're going to talk to a Democrat who's a little upset that some of his colleagues are opting out of that big speech. But we do know that part of the theme of that big speech will be not only crowing a little bit about the tax cuts and what's been happening and all these companies and what they're doing, but this move to change the way the United States government, for example, handles entitlements, like Medicaid, for example. Some are calling it a modern-day welfare to work, something that Bill Clinton championed with Newt Gingrich. This is sort of like a work to Medicaid or Medicaid to work, whatever the case. It's something that is happening in Maine as we speak right now. not even waiting for direction from the federal government. The Republican governor of that beautiful state joins us right now, Paul LePage. Governor, very good to have you.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be back, Neil.
The issue is that able-bodied Medicaid recipients should kick in more, right? I mean, is that the gist of it?
Yeah, they got to have skin in the game, and it's very, very important, and particularly in a state like Maine, a rural state, and being the oldest state in the country, our nursing homes, our PNMIs, our mentally ill folks, they're all depending on government support. So, and there's limited resources, and we all know Medicaid doesn't pay the full boat, and therefore we have to get everybody who's able to contribute has to contribute so that the safety net is available for the most vulnerable.
All right, but how do you distinguish who is eligible and who needs it and who doesn't?
Well, basically, if you're physically fit and you're able to go to work, we ask you to either go to work, go to school, or volunteer some of your time. Those are the rules, and if you don't do that, then you don't qualify and you're ineligible to get on to the entitlement.
Are you in sync? And a lot of your critics have said, Governor, that some even voters have had it with this notion. They separately pushed an item to improve and expand Medicaid last year under provisions of the Affordable Care Act. They say you're ignoring their wishes, you say?
No, I'm not ignoring their wishes. They passed a law.
Right.
They want to expand Medicaid, and I'm fine with that. Give me the money. I can't expand Medicaid without funds. I have to pay the bills. And therefore, until you identify how we're going to pay for it, I can't implement it.
You know,
I cannot spend money I don't have.
Fair enough, sir. There are many people who look at what's happening in the Medicaid experiment that really you led with in your state, for good or ill, depending on someone's political point of view. But that what the president is going to outline could be something similar on a national basis, and that he might be setting the stage for addressing virtually all our entitlement programs, Medicare, who knows, down the road, Social Security. Now, it's too early to say about Social Security. I grant you that. I don't want to make that leap here. But is it your sense that what the president is going to offer is just that, what you're doing in Maine, he wants to do nationally?
I believe that is correct. I've spoken to the president about it. He likes what we're seeing in Maine. Right now, we've done some welfare reform in our SNAP program and our TANF program. And revenues for the folks that have gone to work are up about 114, 120%. People are dropping out of the system. They don't need to be on the system anymore. And there's a couple things that nobody wants to talk about on the left. One, you remove these people from isolation. You get them into relationships, into the workforce. They are now contributing towards their own well-being, and now we're positioning them while they're working to get commercial health insurance instead of Medicaid health insurance, which doesn't cover the full cost. And I think that hospitals in Maine who were campaigning to have Medicaid for everyone are realizing that people that were on the exchanges that were getting commercial rates are now are going to fall off, and they're going to be paying. They're going to be getting less than adequate support from the Medicaid system.
Governor, we're going to watch closely because what you're doing there could be an incubator for what happens nationally. Very good seeing you again, sir.
Well, same here, and I'll tell you, it is working, and people are recognizing it, and the people are thanking us for it.
All right. Thank you, Governor. Senator Joe Manchin has a message for Chuck Schumer. Build the damn wall. After this.
I knew the three of us. Chuck will make a deal. He'll make it happen. Nobody wants these children. I don't have many in my state, so it's not. I have empathy for these.
Yeah, but he took the wall off the table. Have you?
Well, he did not. Okay.
Yeah, he did. The funding for that, he says he's not going to.
Well, let me tell you one thing. We need to have border security, Neil. I'm voting for border security. There's other Democrats who will vote for border security.
All right, Joe Manchin telling me do the wall. As soon as it looks like the president is going to do citizenship for a lot of those dreamers. Do we have a deal? Let's ask Rich Edson. He's following this very, very closely at the White House. Rich, what are you hearing?
Yeah, good morning, Neil. No deal yet, and lots of time to negotiate, at least in Washington time, until the early part of March. But the White House does have a proposal on the table. It's been largely rejected by Democratic leadership, but the deal is, for them at least, the White House, and we're talking, of course, about these dreamers, folks brought to the United States illegally as children. The president says he wants to provide a legal status for the so-called DACA recipients, 10 to 12-year path to citizenship for as many as about 1.8 million people. But in exchange, the White House wants a $25 billion trust fund to fund a border wall system, eliminate the visa lottery system, and end chain migration. Yesterday, the president was discussing this, saying that he does want to keep these folks in this country.
Everybody wants to solve the DACA problem. They've been wanting to solve it for a long time. It should have been solved by President Obama. It would have been easier to solve it, especially when he had the House and the Senate. They could have solved it in a day. But they didn't solve it. He didn't solve things. And he did something that he didn't have the right to do. You understand. He did an executive order, and that was no good. And by the way,
Senator Chuck Schumer simply says that the White House is using dreamers to get DACA. Back to you, or to get what it wants. Back to you.
To get what it wants. Yeah, all right.